thing together at the last minute. We've got a good show for you today. We've got a good lineup. Sean's going to be hanging out with us for a little bit. We got Jim. Appreciate both of you guys for jumping in. And, of course, Joe. Joe, how are you doing today, man?
You know what? I'm well and good. I'm trying something new today. This is also streaming over there at Tactical Wisdom. I don't know how that's going to work. We're going to try it. Why not?
That's awesome, man. Yeah.
And, hey, I've made my first 10 cents being monetized on YouTube. So I'm going to get to $1 billion 10 cents at a time. So,
hey, man. Well, I mean, that's that's the way it works, right?
I know we talked about this before the show, but I'm so grateful that Ukraine showed how much they pay attention to our show, didn't they?
Yep.
We put pause on reporting on developments in the Ukraine war, so they decided to put pause on their offensive. Very nice.
Yeah, once they found out that the Council on Future Conflict was not going to talk about the offensive anymore, that they're like, well, we might as well not even do it. They've been our partners since day one of the war, and so if they're not going to talk about it anymore, we better rethink this whole thing.
I just got to say that somebody gave us the following before we get started anywhere else. Somebody gave us the following in typed format on Rumble, and I had to make it into an actual meme for them. So I just whipped that up here real quick.
Well, that's
oops. Oh, I fucked it up. It was, why is it me who's always late? No, it must be the clock that's late and gay.
Oh, yes. I mean, let's be honest. I would hate to start being on time because then it's the meme. It's worth it for the meme. Though I will be honest with you, I can't tell you how many times I sat there, going to watch Nick Rekieta and then literally realizing that it's like 30 minutes after the supposed start time of his show and no word of anything. And then
we still showed up earlier than the Ukrainian offensive did.
Hopefully we don't call it quit as early as them. So we'll see.
Yeah, we won't be tapping out. We may start late, but we won't tap out. That's for sure. Sean, good to have you here today. How's life in the legal profession treating you?
Well, today's a quiet day because that's the neat part about having the bank holidays under schedule. So,
right.
I'm happy to celebrate Juneteenth.
I was gonna say today's a federal holiday. That's right.
Yes. So
Juneteenth.
Other than that, today's not bad.
The time-honored and long-running holiday that it has been.
I mean, let's be honest. What it ideally, celebrates is not a dishonorable thing to have a holiday for. The problem is just the political nature in which it was brought about in the first place. It's anyway. It is what it is. Jim, thank you for joining us. How's life? How's life in that deep, dark well that you look at the world through? I guess Jim has stepped away for a moment. Well, Jim will get back to us. Watcher, how's life in the gaming industry?
It is what it is.
Are you sold out of the launch set for?
No, but we haven't put them on the website specifically because we've got people locally trying to buy them.
So they just have to kind of link up with, and they're technically not available until like the 25th, right?
Yeah, they're pre-sales until the 24th.
That's a good problem to have.
Yeah.
Hey, Jim's back. Jim,
yeah, I'm sorry about that. Just my take from the deep dark hole that is the Capital District. I think Juneteenth. It's like all federal holidays. It's a good holiday, but we have plenty of good things to celebrate. We don't need to make them up.
I would sell it if you told me I had a federal holiday for the 17th, Tuesday and every year. I would gladly take that.
The thing is, they kind of feel obligated to move things around and change things. It's kind of like the basing names conventions. It's like, come on, guys. There's so much more important things to do than all this nonsense that's being done. All the important things are not getting done.
Imagine how many people have mandatory training today on what today is. Glad to be out of corporate America.
Yes. I always find it funny. Hairway to Steven says, I always find it funny that a bunch of ex-military guys aren't punctual. It's their soft rebellion. You're not wrong.
Everybody's got bad joints.
But you know what? Here's guys. Let me tell you the deep dark secret. I mean, if we just couldn't get our shit together until like the very last minute, that would be one thing. But in fact, this group has been sitting around talking about the same things we're going to be talking about here for the last 30 minutes almost. So I mean, it's like it's not like we're not here. We're here. We're looking at the chat. We're talking about the topics. Sometimes we're getting the last few odds and ends together. Or in today's case, we were collecting some of these videos from around the web showing the National Guard invading your hometowns. You guys don't care about how to make a watch. You just want to know what time it is, and so that's what the show is. But there's something to be said for the method to our madness. All right. Well, on that end of let's get to the show itself, and let's jump into our first odds and ends. Before we talk about that, though, if you haven't done it already, please like the video. That really helps the interaction, and share it with your friends. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, either on YouTube or on Rumble, please do. That's very helpful. And we are also live actually on Twitter if you want to check us out that way as well. I'll be sending the tweet out here in a few minutes for promoting the show. So if you're over on Twitter, feel free to give that a like and a retweet as well. So global economic surprise plummets as Eurozone enters recession. Say it ain't so, guys.
I don't think it's much of a surprise.
I mean, if you're a viewer of this show, you probably know that we're not the most bullish people on Europe in general, much less their economy. Real quick before I read this, Jim, if I told you that the Eurozone is going to enter a recession, would you be surprised by that?
I'd be surprised by the use of the word recession. I would guess that they'd probably use the word growth is paused.
Right.
But they felt they might abuse that this week. I don't know. I'm not shocked.
What's funny is the creative language they've been using in the last couple of years in order to say recession without saying recession.
Exactly.
A period of inverted bullish behavior, something along those lines.
Yeah.
All right. Investor sentiment is clearly bullish. Oh, it is? CNN Fear and Greed Index for June 18th, 2023 stood at 82, which signals extreme greed. This is a drastic optimistic move after closing at greed at 56 over 100 a month before, and extreme fear 17 over 100 only 1 year ago. However, in the same period, the Citi Global Economic Surprise Index, I love these names, the Greed Index or the Surprise Index, has declined 12 points, with the Euro area component collapsing 123 points. The U.S. Economic Surprise Index also declined by 13 points. Now that is not surprising that Europe is doing worse than the U.S. There is no cutting edge economic development occurring in Europe outside of who are we going to sell our F-16s to. And in that case, they have to realize that it's a donation and not a sale. So that'll be even worse. The disastrous performance of the Euro area, which fell into the recession in the first quarter, is also happening while this economic region enjoys significant tailwinds. Declining energy and commodity prices has also supported the Euro area's GDP, boosting the external components thanks to meaningful lower imports. Furthermore, the Euro area should benefit from the expected positive impact of the massive EU next generation stimulus plan. Now, okay, anytime I hear stimulus plan, it's one thing when the U.S. does stimulus because we more so than anybody else in the world can print our own currency and just buy into our own economy, which of course is disastrous in the long term. But in the short term, it can be very beneficial. But the Europeans can only do this to a much lesser extent. Let's just go around the horn here. Joe, I know when we think of you and tactical wisdom, and I think when I ask you about Europe, I expect you to say, I'm praying for our European brothers, but I don't know what the hell they're doing. That's kind of how I feel about it, at least. I mean, what's your take on Europe and all this negativity they're going through?
Well, my take on Europe is that it's independent of the rest of the world. They literally don't do a whole lot of production on their own. They do a lot of consumption on their own. So as costs have gone up throughout the rest of the world, their costs have gone up. So it's really just a symptom of the greater global malaise. And I think that as far as preparedness is, you should be prepared financially. It's certainly a big deal. So.
Well, the funny thing is that and this is a good throw to for you, Jim, I think, is that, when I think of Europe, I think it's, negative. But what I'm kind of surprised by is that we aren't, that this bullish, all these bullish indicators that they keep talking about in the markets. Well, that's the thing that surprises me the most.
Those
Europe
are called
got
lies,
spared.
Scott. Those are called lies.
Europe got spared over the winter because their winter was so mild and their energy, but they still have major energy problems. The U.S. has a lot of problems too, but it's it's almost like we're whistling past the graveyard.
Well,
Jim,
we have to actually be honest with ourselves too, though, Scott. We're only not in a recession because we changed the definition of a recession. If you go by the definition of recession that's been around for 100 years, we've been in one for a long time.
Growth, yeah.
Anyway,
so Jim, I want to throw to you, and what do I need to understand to better understand this current scenario we find ourselves in?
Delusional commitment to growth markets, and a fear of what lies on the other side. But people they're not willing. So when you see the greed level up that high, that's kind of an ate up way to look at it. But people are afraid to lose out, and there's so much automated commitment to these investment funds. The funds are probably withdrawing their own independent money, and they're pushing in the consumer money. That usually what happens in this kind of cycle is they get the retail investor all spun, and then there'll be a cliff, and they'll be ready to jump in with their cash to pick things up at a discount. A lot of people are talking about a cliffing market coming up. We'll see what happens. I mean, again, no financial advice. It's just very strange to me how the retail investors keep stepping into this market.
So, say a little more about what a cliffing market is.
Oh, just a large correction appears to be imminent, like always. I mean, it's always imminent. It just happens to be, the timing, and nobody likes to time these things, but it is a prudent time to be taking cash off the market for a lot of people, except when you're sitting in cash and the inflation rate is high, it loses value. So there's this strange bias to go into assets. The problem is tradable assets are, have questionable liquidity when the market tanks. So people are very much long markets. So they love equities, and they love all those equity funds that they're in, and they keep monthly every year dumping their 401k money in there, and the government tax advantages it, so they stay with it. But when there's a major correction, it's painful. So we'll see. But money seems to be flowing into the United States equity markets, or at least it's kind of flat. We'll see what happens. I honestly, it's one of those things that you can't prognosticate what's going to happen accurately, because none of it makes any sense, except if you look at it from the human behavioral standpoint. You say people are just doing what they want to do. People are not overly fearful. It's a curious thing. I think Stan in a conversation a couple of days ago just said it was delusional, and I think he's probably right.
Yeah, I think that's a
The
good
big
point.
thing that I'm watching is urban real estate. That's the one that's got me most creeped out.
Well, and we've been talking about that for a little while now here on this channel with the
Yep.
idea that these people never went back to the offices and after COVID, and so a lot of these developers have been left holding the bag as many companies are not renewing their leases, right?
Yeah, I had somebody explain to me yesterday that they're in these real estate investment trusts because they have such good yields. And I said, well, what happens? What happens if the rents don't get paid? And he said, well, that's not going to happen because the big corporations are paying those rents. And I had to stop for a minute and think, has he really thought it through? And I didn't dive into it too deeply, but a lot of people have invested in these assets because they want the asset value. Problem is, downtown major city class A office and hotel looking kind of creepy to me. And full disclosure, I don't own any. But it's just strange to me that after you've seen hotels go back to the banks in San Francisco, and you're hearing that 50% of the employees aren't showing up in the major cities, even after being asked to, right? That's the part I find quite amazing. I don't see that ending well in any circumstance. So
Yeah, I mean, I think we talked about that on Friday. I think we talked about the Google employees were told to come back. Or it was on Privy Council on Wednesday. Google employees were told to come back and then didn't. So Google said, we're going to get harsh with them, and they're supposed to come back, but we're going to copy them on all the emails and send them all the data anyway. They're not really going to enforce it.
Yeah, they can't lose all the good people. But I mean, Amazon went through this in Seattle too, trying to get people back to the office, and everybody said, oh, but it's gotten icky downtown.
Well, there's a whole class of people now who are just coming out of college as the pandemic began, who are now thinking it's absolutely ridiculous that companies expect you to come to work and work in the building for 40 hours a week.
Yeah, it's unnecessary.
Yeah.
Well, and here's the sad thing is I mean, they've proven that workers are not as efficient in at home as they are versus in the office. But the funny thing is, some of these businesses are deciding they're getting enough out of their workers, keeping them at home. So basically, what they're doing is they're probably saying we can pay them for 40 hours a week, but only get 30 hours a week, and we're going to take those 30 hours.
And I don't have to pay for electricity and office space and vehicle maintenance and all that other stuff. I don't need a janitor anymore.
3 square meals a day.
Yeah.
Private chefs, climbing walls, masseuses.
Yeah.
I can close down the bar. Yeah.
Yeah, especially in San Francisco and New York City, where some of these, kind of marquee developments were, these flagship corporate offices and things like that. That stuff is going away.
It also, so one of the
ahead.
parallel pieces to this that I've been looking at a lot, that when you start talking about Latin America, you start talking about Africa, and you talk about Asia, you're not going to get consequential deals done unless you're there in person. And this whole commitment to virtuality, not going to close deals, not going to open new relationships. You're going to need some help, and you've got to physically be present. A lot of legal requirements of being present, signature authority, so on and so forth. And there isn't a perfect digital option yet. And so people have to go back to the office. People have to work with their peers. You got to do team building. So if you're the only country doing this, you're going to be in serious trouble. So the Europeans and the Americans were flying around the world being those digital nomads. I think it's going to be harder and harder to do that kind of thing.
Well, the other thing too that I'm reminded of, and was it the 2000s, maybe early 2000s, maybe late teens, when if you went to a mall, especially the mall you used to go to back in the 90s or whatever, you show up and you're like, wait a second, every third store is empty. There's not as many people here. I mean, I think that's the way downtowns are getting, especially in some of these mid-sized to larger cities. There's just a lot of nice buildings.
Yeah, they're hollowing out. But the malls are hollowing out too, because
even worse than they were. Yeah.
Yeah,
even worse than they were.
everybody buys from the web, right? And you got full returnability. It's a really interesting dilemma that retail's kind of killing itself.
I had an interesting trip with my family right before COVID hit. This would have been over New Year's, going to 2019 to 2020, right? That kind of. We were actually at Disneyland on New Year's Day. But before we went up to LA for Disneyland, we were in San Diego, where I used to live back in the 90s, late 90s. And so it'd been 20 years since I'd been there. And I was, we were going to see a lot of the touristy stuff, but we also kind of went and saw a lot of places where I used to hang out or work or just lived, right? Because I wanted to see it, and I just wanted to show my kids and whatnot, hey, I used to live here. And I was just shocked by for instance, the one place that just really kind of floored me the most was in the Gaslight District of San Diego, which is the downtown area, and it's centered around this mall called Horton Plaza, right? And Horton Plaza is one of these multi-story outdoor malls, right? Where it's completely, it's a California type of thing. And I was shocked at how empty that mall was. And they had many of the marquee locations were completely empty. And I was just I didn't even want to go walking through there, because there was nothing to see. I mean, you could see that the stores and some of the stores were closed, right? And this was before COVID hit. And it was a different story in LA. Things were open, but on the Sunset Strip, the homeless problem back then was already started to get out of control. And I was like, I'm not taking my family around this area anymore. And so we took off actually early on that day in LA and stayed around Disney and Universal Studios for the rest of the time there. So, I was completely disincentivized from showing my family any of that stuff. So it's, America's in decline. And what does it say, Joe? The collapse is already happening. We just haven't.
Collapse has already happened. You just don't know it. I mean, look at this case that we are just learning about of the guy who went and killed his neighbor for masturbating to the children. I don't know if anyone has seen this, but over the weekend somewhere, this guy, they called the police multiple times. The police went and talked to the guy, and never any action was taken. So the guy took it upon himself. That's an inevitable result of failing to enforce law, and it just hastens the collapse that much faster. So going to make people take law into their own hands. Same thing economically. We'll just remove ourselves from their economic system.
All right. So from European recession to American collapse, I think that runs the traps on that one. Let's move on to our next odds and ends, shall we? This is another good one here. Sorry, I'm opening the link here on my computer. Okay. A new path to economic power is imminent through BRICS. Now, this is something we were talking about. This is one we added right towards the end of our pre-show talk. And I think I feel bad Stan's not able to make it today, but he was on with us before the show started. And I think this is an interesting topic. We've talked about it before, but we're really starting to see more and more chatter. I mean, Jim, what was it? About 6 months ago, there were people absolutely stomping their feet saying the move away from the dollar is not happening. There is no kind of alternate currency being developed to fight internationally against the dollar. Okay, maybe, but there's definitely a group of countries that are tired of America swinging its big stick around. The SWIFT system and all this kind of stuff, and they're looking for an alternative, and the BRICS seemed like that's it.
People want to join the BRICS, and all the commodity-focused countries that are having economic problems based on their lack of diversification are piling in. So, places like Brazil, South Africa, and so on and so forth will use this platform, and they'll come up with a trading mechanism soon that will displace the requirement for the dollar. But the dollar is going to be around. It's just as Janet Yellen said for the first time last week, it's going to see itself decline in fundamental power, right? I mean, and for years they said it wasn't happening. She finally came out about a week and a half ago and said, yeah, it's going to happen, just like it was fact all of a sudden. So the deniable stuff that they've been, the denial that's gone on for months and months and years, the BRICS are going to take care of themselves. And the Argentines, the Brazilians, and all these countries with deep debt issues are not going to be wanting to play the dollar rules or the IMF rules. They'll be doing the BRIC Bank rules, and they'll be doing the AIB China rules. And everybody said that they can't use the Chinese currency because it's not tradable. They'll use it in a different way. There's going to be a mechanism they come up with, and Stan has always talked about a basket of commodity values. But it's like a return to counter trade. They'll just circumvent the need for the dollar. So I think that's where we're headed.
Yeah, the interesting thing is that we've had some talk about this for years. I mean, this ever since the non-aligned nations back in the Cold War, there was always this kind of idea of like, hey, there's got to be a way to kind of get out of this two-sided situation that the world is in. And then when we became a monopolar world, then it was, well, the Americans control everything. And that's when you saw the rise of the international institutions. And, we used sanctions literally every week. There was a new sanctions against somebody. And the position of the dollar as the petrodollar and as the, currency used for international settlement for essentially all international, financial transactions. Really allowed them to do that. But times they are a changing. We've used that big stick too many times. And I think I don't think this is a support for Russia directly, but I think our heavy-handed sanctions approach, following the invasion of Russia and Ukraine, is what has really kind of given the jet fuel to this BRICS independent trade block. Am I all wet on that?
Well, no, you've got Dilma Rousseff, right? The Brazilian woman who's been put in charge of this organization. Just look at her language. It's urgent to create a new architecture to channel the available liquidity to make financing feasible and scale and under the conditions required by the global South. So when she says the global South, she's talking about Brazil, Argentina, South Africa, the people who are, quote, left behind in the dollar-denominated world, the people who've constantly had to go back to the IMF to get bailed out. And, it's to the exclusion of the United States that this is premised, right? And it's become the mantra that these people are operating under. We seek to fund a greater share of our projects in local currencies with the dual objective of strengthening member countries' domestic markets and protecting our borrowers from the risk of currency fluctuation vis-a-vis the dollar, right? So they don't use the words, but what they're saying is they're de-dollaring as much of their economic activity as they possibly can. And the Chinese are going to clearly be on board with this because they don't want to expose the yuan to international competition. They want to maintain control of it. We were talking earlier about walled gardens. China's always been a walled garden. 25 years ago, when I tried to explain that to people about the currency, they kind of, their eyes rolled up in their head. Oh, but they're going to take SWIFT one day. And I said, no, they're not. The next thing we talked about walled gardens was the internet. Oh, they're going to have to connect. I said, no, they're not. Put your bong down. They're not going to connect. And they kept saying, oh, no, the Chinese will have to connect because data is money. Data is power. They have 100% control of the data that's consequential to them. They've always thought as a walled garden. Now, outside the country, they'll do anything to play, right? Because it doesn't impact them directly. So this is a perfect example of the Chinese. They love this stuff because they're riding on other people's actions and other people's sovereign decisions. They're just stimulating it. And so when there's a shortfall, you'll find that the AIB Bank and the Belt and Road BRI finance teams will step in and back these multilateral, multicultural solutions that substitute for the dollar and the euro. So it's going to be really interesting to watch how the Europeans engage with these people. And it isn't a small group of people, right? It's going to be Bangladesh, Egypt, UAE, Argentina, Brazil. India will step into it. My guess is Vietnam will probably hop in. Anybody who's got a commodity trade will play this game.
Yeah. I mean, it definitely advantages countries that are commodity rich, right?
Mhm.
Less, if you have a strong manufacturing economy, that's okay too, because ultimately you become a great market for commodities. But ultimately, it's those, fungible commodities that are very, if you make BMWs, right? It's easy to sanction BMWs. It's hard to sanction oil. So that's kind of the way I look at it, and the reason why commodity economies are really anyway. With this story here talked about the new path to economic power is imminent through the BRICS, and so it just kind of goes into the idea of what we've been talking about, settling trade for things such as LNG or oil or gold or any of these other kind of things you extract from the earth, right? That when you actually pull it out, it's impossible to figure out, if that piece of gold came from South Africa versus, Congo versus Alaska, right? These are the kind of things that local currencies are going to be used to settle this, or it'll be like you said, a barter economy. Like, hey, here's our oil, you give us your gold, right? And then Stan has kind of taken that one step further, saying that, and this is once again, if you've listened to the show, this is not the first time you're hearing this. That it would be a basket of a basket's currency backed by a basket of commodities such as gold and oil and natural gas and other types of things like this. So that is the attraction of the BRICS these days, and I don't know where that's going to go. I think it makes sense for countries like the Middle East, and for instance, you had mentioned Dubai being one of the places where Dubai, it's in their interest to become the place where all this stuff is settled, right? To be the
Well,
hub
yeah,
for
well,
this.
you can settle it anywhere that chooses to participate. And all it is a synthetic structure that has an underwritten value at any given time. And so people will look at it and say, I'm going to run it through this new development bank process, much like, let's say, the Islamic Development Bank had its own, acceptable practices. It's not going to be any different. And it's going to have some friction as it starts up, but they'll be able to bury that, and the Chinese will probably offset it. So, Dilma's, it's funny, the Chinese have gone to Brazil to man this, right? So they've gotten all these Brazilian Marxists to do it. And Dilma hired this guy named Jobber, who's a well-known China guy. And he's 100% on board with China and 100% on board with displacing the Americans, right? So this is, regardless of how well it's done, it's going to take on a passive anti-American role in the global financial structure. And when the US pushes a little too hard on something, people will just step back and they'll go to this mechanism and say, take us, we want to work with you. And it's what I've warned about for decades, which is we weren't welcome at the table 20 years ago. And we're just going to be less welcome now than we were 20 years ago, because we bring this legalistic overhang of the US government to the table, and it causes people to have to break with traditional mechanisms in their own countries that drive commerce. And up till now, we were the sole provider of liquidity globally. Now, you're going to have these alternatives, and we're going to have to learn how to play by these new rules of sharing or competing. And I think it's going to be painful. So yeah,
Well, it means
go read this guy Elias Jabber, the Brazilian economist. It's quite astounding, the stuff that comes out of his mouth, but he's not terribly wrong on everything. So.
Well, so the bottom line is that if you trade in dollars, or if you're a company based in America, you're at a disadvantage in a lot of ways for these other countries, because they don't want to deal with our rules and they don't want to deal with our money, because we've made our money poison in so many parts of the world. Now, that being said, there's still the vast majority of the economic stuff is occurring in dollars, but and so we're not overnight away from this, but still.
Yeah,
this is-
there's a Faustian bargain underway here, right? And if you make it too hard for people to use the dollar, they'll go somewhere else and use something else. And the guys at the Treasury will say it'll never get to be of scale. But it takes away growth, and it takes away stimulus, and it takes away influence in countries you want to influence. And so the ramifications of a passive de-dollarization, not active but passive, creating alternatives to the dollar. You can't make all of those people enemies of the state. You can't put them all on a Treasury list. You can't blacklist them on OFAC's list, right? So you get to the point where you're making so much noise about everybody that nobody wants to invite you to the party. And I sense that that's a trap America's not overly comfortable identifying. And I hope the guys in Foggy Bottom and at Treasury are paying attention that it's getting harder and harder for Americans to go participate in business everywhere. So that government doesn't do business, right? Government creates rules that allow you to participate in business under those rules. It's gotten very hard for Americans to participate in international business because our rules are perceived globally and enforced globally by our sovereign, whereas the rest of the world operates in gray areas much more efficiently. We're seeing a growth of the gray area of the global economy and a shrinking of what would be the American-centric, transparent business concepts. It's just the way it's going.
That is enough to make my head hurt. And then, of course, you've got that. This is the story you were talking about. Rousseff names Chinese apologist to BRICS Bank. Yeah, check that one out. That's I haven't read it yet, so definitely.
But that'll give you the cultural understanding of what the BRICS Bank is going to be like, and where they're going to go, and what they're going to do.
Yeah,
all the language is there to tell you what they're going to do, and it's an alternative to the bad Yankee model.
So this is a clean break on this and transition to our last odds and ends. I mean, I assume, Watcher, you put the story in because I was just reading the first couple paragraphs of it, and I'm not liking, the whole idea of connecting a digital ID to your bank account, and it's like KYC.
Yeah, this one's not cool, man.
Yeah, it's basically KYC for your entire, internet existence, right?
Yeah, it's the UN's vision of the future, don't you
I
know?
see no downside to this.
Look, there are enough butthurt UN politicians that are pissed off about people getting away with making fun of them overseas, that they've decided that now they're going to organize and set up a governing body to rule over the whole internet. They're going to try and require digital IDs to be tied to your bank account to associate with anything that you do online ever. They're setting up a censorship body that is going to be the apex body in charge of the entire financial system. It's going to enhance its coherence and align its priorities with the 2030 agenda for sustainable development.
It's
If
not
you're
unaware that Jack Ma is in that photo.
Oh yeah, no, Jack Ma's he's been tapped to be the head of it. And hey, who developed China's current like the actual operating bones of China's social credit system?
Jack
Pinky
Ma.
in the brain, Pinky in the brain.
Yeah. It's no mistake that a gaming company actually invented the gamification of national security within China. It's pretty evil the way they've done it, and there is a gamification to this. They were talking about how you get publicly shamed through facial identity, and then you can. But so if you do something in public like jaywalking, you can literally see a thing that shows your face up on the screen above the crosswalk, and you can see your gain or loss of points, social credit points, through real-time interactions with security cameras around you. If you're doing something
and the point of that is to get the rest of the citizens to shame you as well.
So,
Well,
so
right,
go
right.
look.
But
Yeah,
go
go look at what Jack Ma developed. Go look at how the Chinese government behaved, and go look at how they inverted it, protecting the walled garden and undermining the international network so that they could harvest data through their platform from the international part without having to open their walled garden. And that what
let
you're
me
seeing is that model,
let
financial
me
and observational.
Let me read from this article here. A vital part of the agenda is also digital connectivity and the establishment of a global digital compact. This could be
Yeah.
described as a cybernetic organ consisting of a digitally connected network of people, entities, devices, and things that can easily be directed by those who run the system. In the policy brief, it is, for example, explain how digitization would help to achieve the global goals. The suggestions happen to be very similar to what the World Economic Forum and the PwC described in their report as unlocking technology for the global goals in 2020. The digital ID is a cornerstone in this work, and amongst other things, seen as a way to reduce poverty. Now, let me read about digital IDs real quick. Digital IDs linked with bank and mobile money accounts can improve and deliver the delivery of social protection coverage and serve to better reach eligible beneficiaries. Digital technologies may help to reduce leakage, errors, costs in the design. So that's how they get you, right? Hey, listen, you don't have much, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to set you up with this account. And every time you do something good out in society, we'll trickle a little money into your account. So they'll literally pay you in order to be a good citizen and in order to do things that aren't bad. No jaywalking. If you every time you cross the street at a crosswalk, we're going to put money in your account, right? And you could even go so far as to, hey, we won't dock you for crossing at the wrong place, but we'll give you money if you cross. So it's that kind of a carrot kind of mentality versus the stick, which is what you see in China, the stick, right? The carrot mentality would absolutely be just as effective, especially in a place like the West where, hey, if you benefit me, I might follow your rules. But if it's no benefit to me, then I'll just do what I want, right? I mean, how many people would cross the street at the right place or follow the speed limit in their car if they knew they could get paid to do it? I mean, this is absolutely insidious because it's that kind of that. Hey, we're not saying you have to cross at the crosswalk. We're just saying if you do cross at the crosswalk, we'll give you a little money for it.
It's the antithesis of the concept of individual liberty.
Exactly
Correct.
right. It's this collectivization of, and then after you've done this for 2 or 3 years, you're conditioned to it. Then it goes to the idea of shaming people. Scott, why aren't you crossing at the crosswalk, man? You're going to get like $1 if you cross. Because I don't want to wait. I don't want to walk all the way down and go across and then come back. The store I want to go to is right across the street. Dude, that's not cool. And then all of a sudden, like, you're an asshole because you want to cross where the store is that you're going across versus walking 100 meters down the road, crossing and coming back, right? So there becomes this kind of social pressure. And if you're a bumpkin from a place that doesn't have this, then all of a sudden you are a have-not versus a have. The people that live in New York City that have this, that have made $10,000 of the last 3 years following the rules, becoming a good citizen. It's almost like the Stepford Wives of the digital world through our own. It's the Stepford, the whole, I don't know if you guys have seen the Stepford Wives. The whole thing was the men wanted to have these, dutiful wives. So they basically lobotomized the women and had, what was it? They were replaced with androids or something like this. I can't remember exactly the story, but the point is that the willful women were taken away and dutiful wives were replaced that look just like them, replace them, right? Well, we're doing that to ourselves through this system, and it's our choice. And this goes to the insidious nature of the World Economic Forum and all these other kind of international schemes that because they know better. And this goes to stakeholder capitalism. and all this other stuff. We could go on and on and on. But
Well,
Watcher, was there any other thing about this that you wanted to bring up?
I mean, I hate to do this, but just a little bit. I mean,
But there's this big war trying to like basically destroy humanity because humanity has free will, and there's a decision to which level we want to go to. We have free will, so evil's allowed to come and contend, not just good.
I'm sorry. That goes
guy
on for
sounds
like
really
10
smart.
minutes.
Sean, did you was there something you were about to say, Sean? Oh, Sean left.
Oh, he just said I gotta go.
Oh,
Yeah.
I gotta
Well,
go.
sorry,
Oh, all
Sean. I feel bad. I knew we could only we only had him for about 45 minutes, so I just haven't been watching the clock.
He had the honey-do list.
Yeah, bad me.
No, he had a Juneteenth celebration he had to get to.
Well, yeah, there was one more thing I wanted. Oh, hey, there's Sean.
Oh, wait a
so
sec.
let's get to
There's
that
Sean back.
first.
Is it Sean? We were just throwing to you right when you jumped out, and
so anyways, there was one last thing, and that was
Actually,
just,
that's a baller move by Sean. He was like, "Oh, I'm gonna hang up on you one more time."
Here he is again.
No,
There he
sorry,
is
no,
again.
that was me. I was trying to cancel out of something. No,
yeah,
no,
we were just throwing to you as you left.
I am absolutely terrified of the thought people can be paid to comply with the law. That scares me so much. I'm the buggy whip maker seeing the horseless carriage for the first time.
Well, Sean, in your kind of neck of the world with criminal, I know that there have been basically they took serial criminals, mostly small time petty nonviolent stuff, and then they paid them not to commit crimes, and they'd get pay every month or so that they stayed off the police blotter and things like this to see if that was a deterrence to keep habitual offenders out of jail. And they said, well, shockingly enough, yes, it was. They had a 50% lower recidivism rate in people in their study.
Well, I mean, for most people who go out and commit the crime, I mean, they aren't, they're doing that crime because it's something they need. It addresses their issue right away. Then they're done. They're not all necessarily, I'm going to start robbing from Dollar General to become a multimillionaire. It's just, I want a basic, maybe even some quality standard of living in our eyes, but to them, it's good enough. So yeah, giving people a couple bucks here or there, a lot of times can pacify them. But then you run the issue of everybody having a couple of bucks, and then, then it's not worth much anymore. But yeah, that's, I think on its face sometimes it will work, but it's just. I think it works in little groups, but I think if you try to extrapolate that to, large communities, I don't see it working ultimately.
Well, there's a failure rate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That in a place that is a totalitarian place can be justified. And there's a failure rate in a developed country that has the concept of individual liberty kind of built in, right?
Yes.
And so our tolerance of that failure rate would be very, very ugly because of our addiction to individual liberties as described by outsiders.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the
It's
other
why
problem, too,
we're
is that
always,
this
we're
only
always having that
reduces
finger
property
pointed
crime.
at us.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead,
thought
Joe.
you were
Sorry.
I was just going to say this only reduces property crime. It doesn't. Paying a guy who commits assaults to not commit assaults is never going to work because that's not scratching his itch. The fighting is, or the attacking other people is. The power is. Money's not going to stop that. It's the same with rape. It's the same with all kinds of other crimes. You're only stopping financially motivated crimes with this. And so it's a failed policy from that regard. Tying it to social credit's even worse because those kind of people don't care about their social credit.
Well, you see, it's interesting if you don't have control of all of the production, it's very hard. If you control everything, like a China government approach to the world,
Yeah,
you can be very efficient because the person who commits the assault on the train, the crowd piles on and beats him to death and doesn't end up in court. They get complimented for their activity, right? So, or the police come and take them in the night and there's no need for adjudication. It just doesn't translate well to the United States and Europe. So it's why they're really happy with this BRICS bank play, because we didn't get on board. Europe didn't get on board. But it appears Latin America, Africa, and much of Asia are playing the rules. And if you want to look how the successful individual is treated, look at Jack Ma. Understand why he's the poster boy on that UN photo. Go back and look at what they did to him, because Ant Financial got ahead of the Chinese government's ability to put the controls in, right? But now you'll see 2 to 3 years after Ant Financial was successful, Jack Ma's back, and Ant Financial's being allowed to do what he had originally tried to do as a successful individual, right? It's been fully co-opted now by the party. They're comfortable, and it's part of their stack of mechanisms to go out and do this globally. It isn't about the individual, except the potential of the individual to supply value to the greater good. In the case of the PRC, that'd be the party. And you're being turned into a natural resource for the party. It's a really interesting switch on the way individual citizens are treated, and it's completely the antithesis of the individual liberty model we have. That's why nobody wants to talk about the conflicts we're facing. And we're so economically embedded with the Chinese that nobody wants to touch it because it's dangerous. I mean, the head of Raytheon came out and said, we cannot, this is Raytheon Corporation, we cannot decouple from China. The CEO of Raytheon, I never thought I'd hear a major defense contractor say that. It's staggering to me.
What do they get? What do they need China for? Like
everything.
Specifically
Component manufacturing, yeah.
I mean, this is one of those kind of things where, I'm not a big fan of regulations that force companies to do their business a certain way. But when it comes to national defense, this is the one area where I feel like, if you're gonna regulate something like, for instance, steel is a great example, right? We don't have a whole lot of domestic steel left. I think there are some niche steel makers that still operate in the U.S. Aluminum, same. But most of the steel comes from like Finland or Sweden or someplace like that, and everything else comes from Asia. This is the type of industry that, while it may not be economically viable on a market basis, should be one of those kind of things. Steel for tanks have to come from American steel mills, right? And so,
let's be clear. Let's be clear. It was absolutely economically viable until we opened up the IP coffers for how exactly we make our steel to the Chinese and said, "Here, take it."
Well, that's what I'm saying, right? We deregulated, a lot of these industries. We decoupled them from national defense, and so it became open. And when it's open, then so anybody with a lower labor costs can then undercut U.S. companies.
Labor and environmental inputs.
Right.
Transfer them outside the country. So when you're buying an I-beam in the United States 5 years ago, it was cheaper to get a Chinese I-beam that was shipped across the Pacific than it is to get an American I-beam.
And
walk me through the model under which you put that gun to your head economically.
Right. Right. And it goes way beyond just steel, right? It goes to, component parts such as chips and, other electronic components. I mean, soup to nuts in the economic sphere, but that's a little further down
it's that way for oil. I mean, I can drill for shale oil. I can hit Marcellus Shale, and it, even if I pull it out of the ground somewhere in Kentucky, it is still cheaper for me to get it on a boat and get it out of Saudi Arabia or wherever else it is, get it all the way here, and then refine it and still make money.
I feel like this entire odds and ends of these three things has turned into basically a full segment on because each of these things, oddly enough, kind of works into the other and doubles back around. I feel like we're back talking about some of these Eurozone issues, Eurozone versus So it's an interesting discussion, and Jim, it's been a while, but we had talked a long time ago about doing a deep dive show where you spend the entire show talking about the economy and all these kind of issues that are interwoven, that threaten all these things, and how the collapse that we're talking about, Joe, on a regular basis, is affecting our economy and all these types of stuff. So maybe we need to throw that one back on the books, or maybe we need to try to do a privy council on that, because maybe that's a better forum for it. We'll have to figure that one out. But I think we need to move on to our main topic. Sean, can you still stick around, or do you need to get going, or?
I actually have to take off, guys, so I will see you around.
Be
All
good,
right,
Sean.
I wanted to give you an opportunity to say goodbye, and make sure you guys are checking him out on YouTube. Where else can they find you on the internet?
You guys can find me at Potentially Criminal on Rumble, BitChute, Odyssey, and also at potentiallycriminal.locals.com.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for jumping in, Sean, and look forward to seeing you maybe later in the week. All right, so let's jump into this is our main topic. Real quick, Joe, Tactical Wisdom. What's happening on Tactical Wisdom this week?
We're going to do part 2 of our series on the guy who remained behind in a wildfire evacuation.
Yeah,
and what he ran into as far as finding supplies and living on his property and dealing with life without police and fire services in a dangerous situation. So that will be pretty cool. That's going to be coming up soon. You guys might not know this, but I sell books, and you can buy them on my website. Go over there and check them out. tactical-wisdom.com/books. And we are going to be doing a land navigation live discussion on the 30th. And we put up a couple shorts and a few other videos over on the YouTube channel. So check it all out. We got lots of things happening. Going to be more stuff. I'm going up this weekend to scout out locations for our first weekend long Fieldcraft weekend. So we're going to check that out and get that on the books for next month.
Speaking of the Tactical Wisdom YouTube channel, we are live over there on the Tactical Wisdom. I'm actually looking at it right now, 14 watching live, and we got Texas TXGHOs in there, and Church of DBD, and Justin.
I should probably have that chat
before.
open, but all right.
Yeah, well, there's not a whole lot of chat. I think our chats got a little more traffic, but still, it's great to see folks over there in the over in the Tactical Wisdom chat. So if you guys on Tactical Wisdom are not a subscriber of the CFC, make sure you rectify that. Go over to CFC's, subscribe, like the video, and then jump back over into Tactical Wisdom. 17 likes over there in Tactical Wisdom, so more likes than you have viewers. That's a good thing. Looking over at ours, only 50 likes on ours. So if you're sitting here watching the video over here on Future Conflicts, hit that like button. Let YouTube know this is good content, and we'll continue. Oh, looking over on Rumble, same. Make sure you're hitting the like button over there, and yeah. All good. No matter where you find the show or see the show, just, engage. And if you're watching this in the VOD, put a comment wherever you are and let us know what you're thinking of the content. Is this good content, or do we need to talk about something else? Yeah, the like ratio. Yes, Michael is correct. The like ratio on Tactical Wisdom is better than CFC. I mean, what can I say?
Hey, my people are good, man.
Maybe
Joe's
my chat
just
doesn't
more
love me as
huggable.
much. I got the feeling that Ron has not hit the like button. Ron, you just hit the like button.
Ron.
Ron's over trying to get us to take our shirts off.
Yeah, that ain't happening. All right. Nobody wants to see us with our shirts off. All right, let's jump into China says Xi Blinken meeting was just a courtesy. Castigates U.S. for misperceptions. Like I like to say, the old only Nixon could go to China, only Blinken could go to China because Blinken is so incompetent that China feels no threat from him. Yeah, there's no risk to having Blinken come and visit. And from the moment Blinken touched down, I mean, did you guys see the welcome he got at the airport? It was like, some old beat up, uncovered steps, and it's definitely not the VIP red carpet treatment at the airport. Yes, Blinken is not to be taken seriously in the Chinese. Let's see. This is the Zero Hedge article. This is from the update. Initial statements to come out of Monday's meeting. But more statements were issued in follow-up upon conclusion of Blinken's 2-day visit. It seems China wants to let it known that they will maintain the upper hand while not being too eager to embrace Western diplomatic détente. China's President Xi Jinping's meeting with U.S. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken was out of courtesy, in which Xi gave strategic guidelines over bilateral ties. Chinese state television reports. I mean, Jim, you're my best thing that I have to a China expert. I mean, what message are they sending us through this? Because they're definitely sending a message
that you're irrelevant.
Yeah,
they're just moving forward with their national strategies. We've become an irrelevance to them. We're an irritant. They see that we're highly focused on Taiwan. We're rearming in the Philippines. Japan and Korea are jumping on board with us. So we've gone from being a necessary inconvenience to just an irrelevance. We're going to become, they like us being an enemy. Let's put it that way. It's easier.
Well, it says here, China side also said the following to Bloomberg. U.S. should stop saying China is a threat. In sanctions over China, which
so
are
every
illegal.
time they say something, just invert it, and that's where they're coming from.
Stop depressing China's technological development and interfering in the Asian nation's internal affairs. Now, that's an old saw. They've always said, listen, stay out of our internal affairs, right? They want to mess around everybody else's internal affairs, but they want you to stay out of theirs.
Yeah.
No, but it's interesting to see It's interesting to see Blinken over there getting treated like garbage. Yet you have the CEO of Raytheon saying we've got to stay engaged with the Chinese. So you understand the complicated, nonsensical dialect that's going on in DC right now. You've got the corporate entities telling the Blinkens of the world, don't get too harsh on these guys. And you got the Bidens of the world going, where am I? So you've got complete strategic chaos, except for the DoD, which is running around like a chicken with its head cut off, trying to reinforce our allies in that first island chain.
I have a question for Mr. Blinken, since he represents, the country that represents freedom. On what date did Taiwan become a part of the CCP that they would need independence? The answer is they never have been. So Taiwan doesn't need to declare independence. They've always been independent.
They are, yeah. The problem is that this whole fiction of Chinese, was it Taiwanese Formosa or whatever, that was developed when we wanted to open relationships with China back in the 70s.
Chinese Taipei.
Chinese type of, well, but they called it, what is it, Formosa?
Formosa. That's the name of the island.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, right. And so this whole kind of trying to split the hair, right, of two systems, one country type thing. That was essentially a knife in the back of our Taiwanese allies, right? And we've been basically talking out of both sides of our mouth ever since then. Now, I guess you could say, okay, in realpolitik, that's something that you have to do. You can, you might want to be friends with this country, but it's in your interest to do something that it's not in that country's interest in order to get better advantage for your country in a broader sense. If you were to argue it that way, I could maybe see it, but ultimately, I feel like we're completely inconsistent now, and we've lost any kind of thing that we've gained. We may actually be better off right now in just declaring Taiwan an independent nation and saying, China, what are you going to do about that?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know that that's necessarily smart, but it would at least show that we've got some cojones when it comes to international relations. I mean, Jim, maybe that's probably not the smartest thing to do, but I mean, what else can they do?
Was that a question? I'm sorry.
Yeah. I'm sorry. Yeah.
I
was throwing to you on that.
What could Foggy Bottom do?
Yeah.
Foggy Bottom could do the discipline of understanding that the Chinese are no longer their friends, and the recovering panda huggers just need to come to grips with it. And the folks who did their college dissertations and their PhD dissertations on this cooperation need to reset their brains. And you got a guy like Austin Pillsbury who's sitting back going, what are they doing? Right? He reset. And again, he's a Pentagon-focused thinker, but he was a panda hugger. So, you got a guy like Brigadier Spalding, panda hugger in his day, recovered. They understand that the Chinese are just not going to be our friends, and they're not going to be cooperative. And we just have to reset our policies towards that.
No,
all these short-term bullshit you're seeing from the Biden team is simply that. It's preparation for the 2024 election at all cost, including issues of the national interest. And when you have major corporate CEOs in the defense industry piling on to moderate China, that it's a lost discussion, right? So the inside the Beltway leadership is just they're in the bag for keeping China friendly, and they're missing the point totally.
I want to connect this issue that you've just brought up to the issue last week that we talked about, and that Tucker Carlson brought up about, they said that the fix was in against Trump the minute he said that we should basically decouple from China, and he went on the offensive against, what America is doing in its foreign policy realm. Because these companies see dollar signs when they see China. They don't, and because they're companies and they are not, they're not citizens of the U.S. They are these amorphous, dollar hungry. They don't have the same interest that we have when it comes to our country and things like that. And so, when somebody like a politician like Trump says, hey, I want to cut off this gravy train, then they get pretty nervous about that. Watcher, were you going to say something? I'm sorry, you got cut off when.
No, it's all right.
Yeah, Jim went on a rant. The issue in the U.S. is we need to rethink our strategy, and that's a painful, cathartic kind of thing you have to go through. And there is no good time for it, right? But we've been allowing it to skate down the ice, both financially and from a national defense strategy, for 20 or 30 years. And, everybody will say, well, the NSC, the guys in the Pentagon, the guys at the NSA et al., they get it. It wasn't the China policy thing that turned everybody on Trump. It was the inclusion of a couple of people who wanted to change the way the intelligence community and the national security community managed themselves. And I think that's why they went after Trump day one. That's why they took Flynn down. I mean, Flynn had the audacity to say, we've got to change the way the system works. And he was their public enemy number one. They took him down first, right?
Right.
Nobody wants to upgrade in DC. There's never a good time to upgrade. And I think we're at that point. So between now and the 2024, it's going to be these little short-term shuttle activities, and we'll see who wins. and then you hope that the people who win, and this is where I sometimes disagree with Stan, you hope that the people who win will make these hard changes, but they won't be popular anywhere.
Well, I mean, I've made an argument towards we need to go to things that support our U.S. interests, right?
Yep.
And for instance, Taiwan's a great example. Is it in our interest to have a binding agreement with Taiwan that we will help defend them? It may not be. I don't know the answer to that, right? I have some ideas and some thoughts, and sometimes I come on different sides of this. So it's a close issue. But I know exactly. I know exactly what. I know exactly where Blinken stands on it. If you want to play that video real quick. Great minds think alike, right? Because I see that was your next one as well. Yep, that's it.
Reiterated the long-standing on Taiwan. I reiterated the long-standing U.S. One China policy. That policy has not changed. It's guided by the Taiwan Relations Act, 3 joint communiques, the 6 assurances. We do not support Taiwan independence. We remain opposed to any unilateral changes to the status quo by either side.
So does that mean we are opposed to any unilateral status changes? So that would also mean they would be opposed against a CCP invasion and or blockade and constriction of Taiwanese current status. I mean, Joe, this is something you and I have,
The whole thing is contradictory, right?
Yeah.
You can't say we're going to commit to the defense of Taiwan while at the same time saying that we don't support an independent Taiwan. Those two things don't go together. That would be like us allowing China to arm, say, California for its self-defense against the rest of the United States. It wouldn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense. Taiwan is an independent nation. I'm sorry, but that's the truth.
Yes, Blinken has carried Vaseline in his pocket ever since the Alaska talk.
Actually, based on that photo, clearly there was no Vaseline in his pocket.
Oh boy! All right, let's go to the next thing here.
Before we move on, I just want to say it could be. I want to say that while I agree with Joe on most days, it could be that Taiwan itself doesn't want anybody talking about the separation between Taiwan and China at this point, because they're really not ready to rumble. And I think that there's a lot of Taiwanese politicians who are worried about kicking it off by having the U.S.
But that doesn't change my point. It's still
no. I agree, completely agree.
Whether they are or aren't, whether they want to be or not.
No, completely true. It's just, yeah. Anyhow, next one's kind of a doozy as well.
Yes, the Taliban and China discussing banking cooperation. I mean, who didn't see this one coming? I mean,
golden opium.
Well, let's be honest. If I'm Afghanistan, this is absolutely in my interest, right? So I don't blame them at all. This is odds zero hedge via the cradle. The Taliban governor of Afghanistan Central Bank met with Chinese envoys this week to discuss banking ties and business. The bank spokesperson informed Reuters on Friday that in this meeting, economy, banking, relations, business, and some related topics were discussed. Although Beijing does not have formal diplomatic ties with the Taliban government, China is amongst a few countries that have maintained a diplomatic presence in Kabul since the Taliban took the country back following the U.S. disastrous withdrawal in 2021. Following the withdrawal, Taliban spokesman told the Italian news outlet La Repubblica that China would be its principal partner in rebuilding Afghanistan after the 20-year U.S. occupation. China is also interested in bringing the West Asian nation to join Beijing's Belt and Road Initiative. I mean, all of this stuff, whether it's a U.S.-backed Afghan government or a Taliban government, it's irrespective. Because of where and who Afghanistan is, it makes total sense for them to to be in cahoots with China. I mean, they even share a border with China. I don't know if everybody knows that, but there's a thin portion of Afghanistan that reaches in the north all the way to China. So this is not the crazy talk that it may sound like. Afghanistan Central Bank has been unable to supply adequate liquidity to banks due to its inability to print money and the illegal freeze of nearly $10 billion in foreign reserves, $7 billion of which are held in the Federal Bank of New York. China has recently, I think it should seize that money and put it against the national debt, but it would just be a drop in the bucket. China recently showed an economic interest in its neighbor and is seeking investment opportunities. So what do you guys think? I mean, they're talking about the lithium extraction. They're talking about other mining and other mineral deposits. What do you guys think of this, coupling of Afghanistan to China?
China knows what they're doing. We don't.
Natural geographic economics. They need a secondary pathway aside from Pakistan to the coast. They can get to Iran this way. Balances out their exposure to the Pakistanis. And there are some extractive resources up there that they'll make use of. So all the above. And I think you'll see expansion of the highways. You've already seen them go into the gorges and expand the tunneling and so on and so forth. So they're gonna create highways and probably at some point a rail route. And the difference between them and us is they'll involve themselves in the local activity of maintaining order and security without the moral and ethical overhang we have.
Yeah, that's well said. I mean, ultimately, this is actually a good fit for Afghanistan. China is one of those countries that, hey, we don't care what you do internally as long as you take our money and give us access to the things we want, right? We'll build the roads right to the mines as long as you give us first cut at what comes out of the mines.
Yep. Don't kill our people and don't steal our stuff.
JSUP for $10 says CIA exploited the Afghans for opium. CCP exploits them for lithium. What's the better yield for their countries?
Both of them are calming substances when used in mental illness. I think it balances out, man.
At least the opium,
it's vegan, baby.
Right. It's green, man. It's totally green.
It's green. Yeah, no, what it comes down to is there's got to be a mechanism to participate in the local tradition. Chinese will figure it out. I think opium prices will probably fall on the world market because the Chinese will just export it. Just get it the hell out of here.
When I was in Afghanistan, this would have been about 2013, I made the argument to some of my buddies. I was like, listen, it doesn't make sense for them, because they're saying, oh, well, we should extract all these minerals. There's trillions of dollars worth of minerals in the ground. We should get American companies in here and get some of our money back, that we spent in Afghanistan. So I was, listen, it's not going to work that way. I was like, what the Afghans should do is we should give them the security environment that will then allow them to invite Chinese companies to come in, because the Afghan government is corrupt as all hell. And the Chinese will allow them to grift, whereas the American government will allow the Americans to grift, but it won't allow the Afghans to grift off of the U.S. So I was like, listen, it's a better deal for the Afghans to let the Chinese come in and do it. And it's like you said, it's the same under the Taliban as it was the original Afghan government. And then we've got one final. Oh, we've already got that one. And we talked about Raytheon. Anything else on the China front that we need to talk about, gentlemen?
Well, I think one of the clarity that we have now that Chinese weapons are getting through to the Russians.
Yeah,
and there's the kabuki around that. Even the United States is beginning to talk about it. And it's one of those perfect examples of nobody in DC wanted to talk about it because it's painful and it makes Blinken's job harder and so on and so forth. And we got the election coming up again. But yeah, China's industrial capacity is behind the Russian war effort, and not talking about it doesn't do any good anymore, because it gives them a pass on supporting the war against the Ukrainians.
Well,
Simple.
you know, we're seeing issues that the Russians are not having a wonderful time of it in Ukraine, and we're seeing some issues with Russian war production and things like that. They are fully they have factories fully underway, taking old vehicles and renovating them to newer standards. But what we haven't seen is an industrial effort on the part of China to really help the Russians with that process. And I feel for the Ukrainians and their Western allies if we ever see that occur, right? And I don't know what will keep us from having to see that occur, but you know, it'd be bad news for the Ukrainians if that were to happen.
Yeah, definite bad mojo. But I think we're already there. I mean, if you look at most of the Chinese systems, they're derived from Russian, and so they're not far removed. So I think you're going to see more commonality going forward. I'm going to bet the Chinese are going to become the supplier of choice for most of the electrical subsystems.
Yeah. Well,
Because
I
they can
think
do it in
that
volume cheaply, right?
yes, specifically things like thermal sites and other computers, even probably some engine components, things like that. I think
Absolutely.
you've even seen Russia talking in talks with India to buy back T-90 tanks that they sold to India over the last 15 years, because they've sold over 1,000 T-90 tanks to India. I think they're looking to repurchase some of those, and using oil to do it. So I wouldn't be surprised if you didn't see some of those T-90s flowing back into Russia over the next few months, which would be ironic coming from India, right?
You see, India's perfectly non-aligned, right? In their minds, they would do it if it was in their best interests. But we'll see. It's hard for Americans to put themselves in that situation.
Well,
And
the interesting
the
thing.
Indians also have the problem of they're going to need those against the Chinese, and so the Chinese are going to be in a situation maybe wanting the Indians to give them up to the Russians, right?
Well,
So-
maybe the Indians are calculating that eventually, when Western tank production gets underway, which is supposedly in the process of happening, because what we saw a couple years back with the used car market, you went from you couldn't give away used cars in the mid-teens to 2020. I mean, you had cars that you couldn't sell a couple years before. All of a sudden, we're going for $2,000 and $3,000 a car. I mean, it was absolutely crazy. And so it's the same thing in the tank market right now. A tank that was $1 million 5 years ago is now a $7 million tank, because, the situation that we have. There's Joe coming back in.
Stupid machine.
Bayonet actually bayoneted his computer.
I yeeted myself. My bad.
I've been known to do that from time to time. I start closing too many tabs, and I just closed my StreamYard tab. Yep. But yeah, those tanks can't be had at any price in a lot of places, and I think the West is going to find that out. That I think Germany is down to its final 200 Leopard 2s that are in storage at Rheinmetall. Or Kraus Wegmann, because after those 200 have been renovated and thrown back in the field, there aren't any extra Leopards left, unless they rebuy them back from other countries like Portugal and Netherlands and all these other countries that bought them from the great Leopard sale of the early 2000s.
So the big hurdle to tank production is going to be, one, where do you get all that green steel? And two, what kind of emissions are the electric tanks going to have? Once we wrap our heads around that, Scott, we'll be fine.
Well, you laugh, but I mean, there's some significant roadblocks even to building old dirty tanks at this point. The UK can't even build the the cannons, the 120 millimeter cannons for the Challengers anymore because they let that production idle and go away.
Take a
you
look
know,
at take a
I'll be-
look at them. Ask an American company to build out a large nuclear power plant and have them come back to you 36 months in and say, we can't make the containment vessels here in the United States. So we've abandoned all this heavy metal work because
Right.
it's ucky and dirty and nobody wants it next door. It's NIMBY. And guess where it all comes from?
China.
Yeah.
All right. Let's on that China note, let's move to topic 2. Seeing the save 25% on your first battle box with code JOD25. They're in the chat. Go definitely support your buddy Joe out by jumping on that battle box. Joe, didn't you set some like kind of record for those guys when you first started?
Yeah, I'm their number one ambassador. Have been since they first created an ambassador program. So I sold a stupid number of boxes in my first 24 hours and have not been taken off the top yet. They've sent me some prizes, so please keep me in prizes and cash. So
absolutely. All right. So the second topic today is: did you guys know that there was an invasion of America? America is being invaded by America. If you didn't already know this, now here's a secret hint: America is invaded by America every summer. It's called annual training. This is when all the National Guard units all across the country do their AT, right? The annual training. Now, okay, does it seem like, okay, I know that, Scott. We're not just stupid. But this is bigger than I've ever seen it before. I've never seen vehicles in downtown, what is that, LA before.
It's
Oh,
LA.
my Lord. Right? Okay, so, well, we are at war with China. That's right there at Mann's Chinese Theater right there. Speaking of China, you can see the Hollywood sign right through that little cut right there, if I remember correctly. And there's a Dolby Theater. Yep. See, that's Hollywood. That's not just China. L.A. That's Hollywood.
There's the Hard Rock
There's
Cafe
Hard Rock,
right there.
yeah. Anyway, this is the area I took my kids, and it was still all right in 2000, but I wouldn't take them now. Yeah, there's the Mann's Chinese Theater right there. So the people would say, "Oh, well, this is not normal." Okay, well, they may be in spots that they haven't been in the past, right? But these are the kind of things that they've always done, right? And in the past, they weren't training for the things that they're training for now, right? I mean, the mission changes, ergo the training changes. All right, so these are Paladins, M109 A6s or A7s, I can't tell. And they are moving down the side of the road. This is what is known as a road march. This is something typical that I did when I was a mechanized platoon leader here in Korea. Nobody thought that we were invading Korea when we did it. We were just moving from Camp Casey up to Rodriguez live fire range. And in this case here, they are going from the National Guard place where they, like the motor pool where they store their vehicles, to a training site that is apparently about 20 miles or so from where they store their vehicles. So they are getting training value out of moving cross country like this. That being said, there's a reason why. I don't know if you've got maybe the video of the rail haul, or maybe the line haul and the trucks, because we got some of that too. Normally, when you move vehicles from point A to point B in America, you do what's called line haul, right? That's where you throw them on trucks and you move them from point to point. And a lot of times, we have our own vehicles that we transport, our heavy vehicles. Yeah, there we go. This is so like if I were going to, the National Training Center from, say, Fort Bliss, which is the last.
Why
time I
are
went
they
to
all
the
done
NTC.
up with Ukraine-colored duct tape?
Oh, that's probably just somebody being cute. The blue duct tape's pretty common. I don't know about I don't see yellow duct tape though.
Go back. You don't.
Painter's tape.
You don't
Painter's
see
tape.
yellow duct tape.
Well, okay, I mean, I see like on that. I see mostly blue there though. There's some
Painted-
yellow up there. I mean, it doesn't surprise me that they would have some sort of like,
I'm gonna
I mean,
vomit
I've
real
seen
quick. Hold on.
I've seen both of those colors independently, just never together like that. So what you're seeing, I think, is, maybe different than last year, different than 10 years ago.
I'm going to tell you,
Yes.
that's clearly National Guard because they're walking like a gaggle. My goodness. Good order and discipline has gone out the window.
I'm curious what that is. This is some sort of a, I mean, they're carrying a litter there. I don't know. It's some sort of training. They've got they're safe. They've got their
They
PT
got the
belts
road
on.
march there, the road guards. Yeah.
It's the annual barbecue.
And then here you got some Blackhawks moving over. Now, see, I mean, the last time I lived in the States, when I was at the 101st, we saw Blackhawks all over the place all the time. I mean, we had Task Force 160 Blackhawks, and we had 101st Blackhawks all over the place there. These are strikers. This is interesting. I bet these are the same strikers that we saw on that rail haul thing. Because you don't have a whole lot of strikers, in the National Guard.
I think these are the strikers that ended up in downtown Philadelphia.
Okay, that would make sense then. I mean, so these are probably why are they filling up diesel at this? Well, I mean, where are they going to get diesel from? They're buying it off of a government credit card, right? And so they probably made a coordinated stop at this location. And I don't know. This doesn't look like a truck stop, so I don't know what this is. This may be.
No, it is a truck stop.
It's a truck stop.
Is it?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's a Black Cat.
Dude, I can't wait till you get back to America and I take you to a truck stop. You're going to be shocked at the state of the art of truck stops in America now.
I don't know, man. I was at let's see, what are the ones that I Loves? Those I always liked stopping at Loves.
Yep, Loves are always good.
You got two different fast food places and the biggest convenience store you ever seen in your life.
And the cleanest bathrooms. I'm not gonna lie, they're cleaner than rest areas. So Loves is where it's at.
Here's the other thing too, right? I haven't spent a whole lot of time in the U.S. since we pulled out of Afghanistan. So I mean, when we were going and coming from Afghanistan and other deployments, you always saw military vehicles on rail lines going to and from military bases. And now that we've got a lot of these vehicles back in the States, they're just doing more in the States, I think.
Well, I just think that what scared everyone was, first of all the tensions we're under right now.
Yeah.
And the fact that it was all in one weekend, which is actually a little bit odd, but we're just picking up the training pace, I think. I was even the one that really got me was the Paladins, because that was unusual. That out of all the videos I saw, that's the only one that was unusual to me. And then on further research, it's just National Guard not thinking it through, right? It would have been better, like you and I discussed, to do that at night than in broad daylight and risk everyone slamming into each other on the freeway. But
back in the 90s when I was in the National Guard, I was in an armor. I actually have a couple stories about this. I was in an armor company, and we had one tank at the armory, and the rest of our tanks were stored at the Western Kentucky Training Center. They called it Wet Site, right? And that's where you could actually do some maneuver training and whatnot. No, there were no gunnery ranges there. If we had to do gunnery, they would line haul us up to Fort Knox. So like, for instance, I remember one year we were there and it was the middle of the night and we were guarding things and we were like, hey, I got to get we're going to go get some dinner. So we got in the Humvee, drove off of the Western Kentucky Training Center and went to I think we went to a truck stop actually in the Humvee, right? And it was the first time I ever drove a Humvee, which was remarkable. I just felt kind of weird. We were driving a Humvee around, like, going to a truck stop. I'm sure it was, by UCMJ standards, probably not legal, but I feel like the statutes of limitations is
well,
20,
I'll tell you,
27
all
years.
of this panic makes me wonder, like, how they do. off-post patrolling of off-limits areas now, because, for example, we would go to all of the bars and trailer parks that were off limits, just driving through looking for military personnel. Would people now freak out and say that was martial law? We weren't there for the civilians, right? We were there for the guy sneaking out of that one trailer park he knows he's not supposed to be at.
The strip clubs and the tattoo parlors and things like this.
And for the record, for all of you young aspiring military policemen, always volunteer for the off-post patrol. All right, the off-limits patrol.
Well, I actually went along with a buddy of mine who was an MP lieutenant. This is when I was a lieutenant in Korea, and he's like, "Yeah, come on with me. I'll take you out on the off-limits patrol, right?" And so we go around in Korea to all the whorehouses and places like this, and he knew all those Ajumas by first name. They were all like, "Happy to see him," and he hugging. And, I was like, let me get this straight. You probably do research and come in on your duty hours to figure out why these places are off limits, I guess.
I'll tell you, when you get assigned to an MP investigations unit and you get to do it in plainclothes, it's a whole new world.
Well, so the funny thing is I was in plain clothes with them because I was off duty, but they were on duty. So it looked weird that me coming in my civilians with them. All the Ajumas thought I was like CID or MPD or something like this, but it was funny. Anyway, this reminded me when I started seeing all this stuff, it reminded me of something from a couple years back. I would say this is probably the 2015 timeframe. Maybe a little earlier. And that was, and if you're a military guy, you probably remember this name, Operation Jade Helm. Joe, what do you remember about Jade Helm?
Everyone's panic. But we do Robin Sage all the time and nothing bad has ever happened. So I think Jade Helm was something that had happened on many times in the past too, right? I mean, that's the thing. I just think that the advent of social media has exposed people to things they didn't know. Like they don't know that military training goes on around them all the time. Law enforcement training goes on around them all the time. Police departments train multi-jurisdictional surveillance units by just picking some random Joe and following them for 3 days. I mean, these things happen. But no one's ever been aware of it before now. And Jade Helm came at a time when everyone was already looking for a big government conspiracy. So here it was, right? So,
I'm seeing an interesting leak for a book cover. I'm going to share it with you. Speaking of American tanks in the U.S., I think this is apropos. I'm dropping the link here in the private chat, Watcher. The other thing too is we saw recently federal law enforcement get in trouble over some training that they were doing in a hotel, where they got the wrong room. I mean, this is the kind of stuff. This is not new. None of this stuff is new. This is all.
I'm going to tell you what was actually worse about that was that their training was even illegal for outside the U.S. Whatever they were doing was not legal. So.
But the point is that if they hadn't got the wrong room and all that kind of stuff, nobody would have ever known, right? Especially in the old days, right?
Yeah.
If you would share that, Watcher, I think so.
There's Alice. I actually know the name of that tank.
That's
I know what book cover that is. A book you all believe is never coming out.
See right there, the first comment is Alice, and then Zuvius is saying bingo.
If at the end of the first book, they paint that on the tank. So
if you are a habitual Moonie, as he calls them, Mongol Moon sequel apologist, like many of us are. I can tell you, and I've known this for it's been since like last year. He's had
I think
good
Stan
work
and I decided
this.
on Wednesday, December of 2022. He told us it was done. So,
well, the interesting thing is, and in my understanding is that they are re-releasing the first book and the second book through that new publisher, and so I think that's probably has been part of it. But anyway, the point is Mongol Moon sequel. Soon we'll be having to say sequel to the sequel, right? When are we going to see that old Mark? Good old.
I'm
buddy?
really digging that Alice is running someone over. This is pretty darn cool.
Yeah. Right. This is definitely. And who is that? I wonder. Is that a Joe Dolio stand-in right there? Or is it a
No? Because I'm on the side of Alice in the second book. Okay, I'm providing
know
some
that,
sniper Overwatch in the book. So,
and many of us probably will find death analogs to our to us in these books. He's talked about how many of us in the community are getting killed, and some of us multiple times.
he also said
based
there'll be
on the
one
amount of health.
conversation that you will tell is a Joe Dolio and Demp McGee conversation. So,
Yeah, looking forward to that, definitely. As much crap as we give Sibley over the sequel, this is a sequel that we are all looking forward to seeing in the near future.
I want to point out something about this, though, is the flip side. So there were the people who are freaking out about the military takeover, but there were also the people on the other side, the letter of the alphabet people that shall not be mentioned because we don't want to get demonetized. But it rhymes with the word you. They were talking about, yes, martial law is coming. They don't realize when they say that what a bad thing that would actually be for individual liberty. And you don't want a military takeover of the U.S., no matter if some random person on the internet tells you do. You really don't. So anyway,
yeah, and so this footage here, we're watching two Ospreys come in, evidently based on the community notes on this post. It's in relation to an upcoming presidential visit to some area. I don't think it was on this version. It was probably another one, but evidently this has something to do. Yeah, there we go. Look at that. To an upcoming. So the FAA website shows the temporary flight restriction is issued for a VIP visit to the San Francisco, California area, 17 June. So basically, like, this is something that is kind of, it's kind of already out there, and people know why it is. And this is where, Joe, this is the problem with taking 10 unrelated things and connecting them together. Is there something there? Well, we don't know. But ultimately, you can't say there's something is there unless there is, right? I mean, it could just be a coincidence. And, that's why you have to kind of watch.
Those were all military police vehicles, by the way.
Yeah.
And those guys were all military police with those visors.
Now, of note, if these are Kentucky, if these were California National Guard, that's exactly who the governor could use if there was some sort of a disturbance in Los Angeles or something.
And you know what, there very well could be. And you'll notice too that most National Guard formations are very heavy on military police for that very reason, because you can't necessarily use federal troops to enforce civil law, but you can use state military police under state orders. So that's what this probably is preparation. Civil disturbance training is probably all that it is. So,
and a lot of them carry state or municipal or county badges too.
Yes.
Right. They're actual police, right? I think about half of the officers in my National Guard unit back in the 90s were like local sheriffs or local police.
It dovetails nicely. Get out of
tickets. Yes. Well, that's about it, guys. Anything else on this one? I mean, I think we've kind of. I don't want to flog a dead horse.
Yeah, give me a second though.
Yeah. So Jim, what do you think about this when you start to see these kind of unconnected things? I mean, what does that say in your head? Do you think there's anything there, or does it seem to you unrelated but connected type things?
Am I concerned by it? Is that kind of the question?
Yeah.
No, I think post-COVID, you're seeing people getting back to it. I think you're seeing a ramp in training activity given the global threat level. And I think it's just hilarious to see California National Guardsmen during Pride Ramadan showing up in West Hollywood. I just think it's perfect.
Right.
No,
What do you think they're gonna be?
Nice. I like it.
there's no better public affairs activity than to put MPs, hot young MPs, in their best battle dress on the streets of West Hollywood. Come on, guys, get with it.
Young man.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I'll tell you what I think the other unacknowledged half of this is probably something like this, right?
I know. Oh, I'm
Well,
sorry.
that's
I
true.
could talk to them.
Yeah.
So I look, I think it's just part of it is you just got a lot of rubberneckers because the military equipment's cool. I mean, look, if I had people posting in the mid 90s about every time the ROTC at the college in the town where I grew up was taking kids out for flights around the town to do to just look over the town and, oh no, it's an invasion. It's the same stuff. I mean, I don't know what to tell you. Plus, we're down on recruitment numbers. If you don't think that somebody's thinking about, hey, let's get some military equipment out and look cool and try and spread it around as much as possible, you're fooling yourself.
Hey man, I was a proponent. I know I was in the minority of many of my military brothers, but I was a proponent of the military parade for like Veterans Day or Memorial Day or whatever that Trump was
Absolutely.
I like that. Yeah, absolutely.
I think absolutely you need to show people what our military looks like, and it needs to go more than just a parade. It needs to be a petting zoo where you line up an entire combined arms battalion on the National Mall with every one of those vehicles open for people to be able to climb on and talk to the soldiers and see them up close, and you've got tables with all their gear on it so people can put on a vest
National
and see how
Janeway
heavy
Day.
those- Absolutely, right there on the National Mall.
And listen,
and-
as a Marine, let me just say, I spent all that time learning close order drill. I ought to get to use it sometime.
Well,
Sexy.
right. Well, but it should go beyond just the combat arms stuff. It should go to literally every piece of Gucci gear that we have in our military should be out there on display for people to see, because that is that transparency. It's like if like this HIMARS thing, right? It's sad that people become aware of HIMARS because we gave it to the Ukrainians, right? Why aren't we, talking about this in the public sphere about the fact that, hey, listen, HIMARS we've known in the military for a long time that both MLRS and the HIMARS are legit systems, that they're world-beating systems in that category, the rocket artillery category. But the American people are only finding out because Ukraine is selling it. Is selling it, and I don't mean like selling it. I mean they are like putting that capability out there for everybody to see how good it is. And we were using HIMARS in Afghanistan, and we were using HIMARS in Iraq, and MLRSs in both of those places as well. So it's not like we weren't using these systems as well. It just had a little more baggage to go through. So I've been a fan of putting the military out there and having them interact with the public for a long time, because I think they're good ambassadors. I mean, I have a lot of confidence in a lot of these kids that join the military every year. Kids, I guess they're not kids; they're all adults, but still, when you get old like us, Joe. Well, I mean, at least we're not old like Ron. I mean, Ron's a lot older.
I mean, we're getting there, but
that's true. One step at a time. All right. That's all I got. Watcher, any final thing for the folks?
Be good to each other.
be excellent to each other.
Selwyn over in Rumble says, now, Scott, Ukraine is also literally selling it. Let's be honest. I mean, maybe. All right. I'm actually with Ron on the title thing. Graf keeps with his German heritage. I like that.
Well, that's why Stan told me I had to change mine from Jarl, which would be a Viking lord, to Marchese, Italian.
I vote. My vote is for Leggett, going back to the
yeah.
the Latin. I'm a big fan of. If we could just devolve everybody back to the Roman era, I think we'd all be better for it. Okay, let's see. That's about it. Jim, any final thoughts? Things people should be looking forward this week?
Well, it's interesting. We're coming into some more active electioneering. People are doing some voting in the Commonwealth, and think hard, make hard decisions, and hold your representatives' feet to the fire in this coming
Let
election.
me ask you this: Do you think any of the progress we made that got the governor elected, and you saw all that activity around the school boards and things like this, do you think that's going to carry forward, or is there going to be some backsliding?
In the Commonwealth of Virginia, I think it's done really well, and I think he's a fairly moderate guy. That's not an insult. That's just an observation. I really like my lieutenant governor.
I do like.
Marine.
Yeah. She's actually pretty base.
Oh no, they're both. We've got an all-star team running the Commonwealth, and they're butting heads with the Democrat-controlled Senate in Richmond, which is trying to keep them from making progress on certain things. But I think they've done a wonderful job. And they kind of rescued the educational system, which is valuable.
Yeah.
I hope he doesn't run on a national ticket yet. I think he'd be a very good national politician. But I don't want to lose him.
No, I mean, you're about 50% right here, Cervix Hammer. There is some of the weirdo things that the Romans did that I am oddly in favor of. But ultimately, I think we need to mix, Starship Troopers in Rome, and I think we'd get the perfect. Now they had public bath houses in Starship Troopers too. Mixed shower rooms. I mean,
yeah, and the Romans also had fish sauce before the Vietnamese, so. There's some things that I don't look forward to in Rome.
Well, this is true. The fact that they had indoor heating, back before it was cool, also was.
I think another political movement to watch, and this is probably because of my locality, is Allah's Boys. Allah's Boys are they're winning the LGBTQ pushback game. And we need to take some lessons from that. And Jesse Kelly pointed that out. That all Muslim city council and all Muslim city government in Hamtramck just absolutely said, no, we will not fly that flag. But I shared on my Twitter account a bunch of videos of the community response. And they're right. They're like, we fled our countries because we were forced to do things we didn't want to do. That's why we will not allow you to force us to do this here. We will fly the American flag because that's who lets us do what we want. We will not fly this pride flag, especially when you try to force us to. And you know what? You can't argue with that. You really can't. And their final word of it was, listen, you tell us we have to respect you, and we do. But you also have to respect our faith, and you're going to have to. And you know what? Until Christians and Jewish people and all of the different religions stand up together and say, hey, listen, we're going to push back against this state-sanctioned religion of transgenderism and LGBTQ pride because you have to respect our religion as well. So I think that's something to watch.
Yeah, they've been very successful, right? Because they are. It's kind of like they've got some protection. They're able to kind of push their thing without being able to say, oh, it's just a bunch of hateful white men, right? So they are immune to that criticism, but it's only a matter of time. And ultimately them being effective, right? Once they're effective, then they will become a target, and you'll see the backlash. So it'll be interesting when that happens because the narrative and the dialectic on the left will have to shift. and this is one of the reasons why the trans have become the ultimate selected oppressed class in the U.S. because anybody can become one, so it's a self-selection, and B, they are completely able to then, because it's a self-selection, everybody else potentially can be criticized. Black men, Muslim men, anybody.
However, they have given
trans.
zero pushback against the Muslims in their last 3 protests because they're afraid of being called Islamophobic.
And because they are, and because they don't, they didn't anticipate it, and they haven't figured out their TTPs for attacking that.
Yes,
block
they haven't
yet.
figured out how to fight back against it. Yep.
Right, and it's just a matter of time before they do. They're going to throw a lot of stuff against the wall.
You know
to
what?
see what sticks.
Cervix Hammer just asked, how long before we get a public stoning in Dearborn? You almost got one last summer. You almost got one. When the teachers union was so adamant about pushing the LGBTQ curriculum, and the Muslim community was like, no, you are not. You could do that down the road in Inkster or down the road in Detroit. You're not doing it here. And it almost came to that. So,
well, yeah, the black white supremacist, right? Yeah, that's like Larry Elders was the black face of white supremacy in California last year when he was running. And then the other one I like was black men are the white men of the woke movement.
yeah, right.
So I mean, they've definitely got the number of black men already, but we'll just wait till they got to figure out this whole Muslim support thing. But the interesting thing is when I saw those crowds of Muslims against Pride, it was a pretty even split between men and women. So they won't be able just to say, oh, it's just Muslim men, men being men trying to assert the patriarchy. Because the women in that community have just as much skin in the game as the men do. So
listen, let me tell you, having spent most of my adult career in and around Dearbornistan and Dearbornistan Heights, fear the women. They can whip a sandal faster than any Hispanic woman you ever saw. You thought the chancla was bad. Let them throw a Middle Eastern sandal. It hurts.
So I think the observation I have, guys, on this whole thing that occurred vis-a-vis the pushback in Michigan is families that have the ability to push back will push back. And, when you can get a community together to actually put like-minded individuals in as the leaders of the community, you actually have some authority to do this. And it's kind of what happened in Virginia is people came to understand it based on kids being in the house. And so seeing what the lesson plans were, and then some of the more egregious stuff that was allowed to happen in the schools was made public, but it happened because parents were paying attention. What I saw was parents, and it's the same thing we saw in Glendale in California when the Armenians, who are pretty devout in their church, came out and said, no, not in our schools. We don't want our kids to do this. So it manifests in strange places, but it manifests in places where people have some authority and they have the structural faith to be able to make hard decisions of confronting a sensitive issue like this LGBTQ thing has been built into.
JSUP brings up the Dodgers had a Latino Catholic protest against, and that was there was about 5,000 of those Latino Catholics
and the
out there.
stadium was almost literally empty.
People are more comfortable speaking their mind. They were cowed by being accused of being bigoted racists for too long. And there was an overplaying of that mantra. And so people they're tired of it. So they don't want their kids being taught things they don't believe. They're beginning to push back.
And you know what?
Well,
in magical irony, do you know who is a member of that group of fake nuns? The former deputy director of the energy department who has been charged with stealing luggage.
The luggage, right. Yeah, I remember hearing about that.
He got snagged again.
Yes, he did.
Tripled up. Yeah.
Okay. We're at the 2-hour mark, so thank you. Let's see. I think that's it. Joe, you've had your piece. Oh, by the way, Joe, did you see the interview with the guy from Michigan who got rolled up for the Gretchen Whitmer thing? But he was released. He was acquitted. Him and that other guy were acquitted. This is of the entrapment. You know,
I didn't see the
militia.
interview, but I don't know how you can rule that 2 people were entrapped and 2 people were not.
Yeah, I was having trouble
Well,
with the same
that's
thought.
because the other two pled guilty. They
You know
pled-
why?
It's
Because
'cause
they
they
were
pled
both,
guilty.
and I'm not making this up, because they were both functionally retarded.
Yeah,
That's
they were not
factually
smart
accurate.
people.
Yeah.
Right, that's what I'm saying. I mean, you know, basically all 4 of them are just as innocent, you know, but 2 of them had the wherewithal to say, no, I didn't do any of these things that you're saying.
Before we go, I just got to say, Joe, I don't know if you saw this, but Mikey Plow actually responded to our favorite Father's Day meme.
Who did?
His
Oh.
his son.
Oh. Nice.
Oh, very cool. Yeah.
Well, he's not wrong.
What did
That
he
tweet
say?
wins the internet. He said,
Yeah.
"My father was a very nice man. He just didn't like people hurting his children."
I'm not gonna lie.
Amen.
Had I been faced with the exact same set of circumstances, I either done the exact same thing or done it much, much sooner before we ever got to trial.
Cool.
You know, the only
You know,
other thing that
seriously though, Allison tells a story of the time when Kat went missing while we were at a highway rest stop. And she's like, it was like a scene out of Taken. I was knocking down doors. I was, you know, it's so easy for someone to snatch a small girl in a situation like that. And
Factual.
but we found her pretty quickly, but it
yeah,
was
minutes matter.
scary. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'll be honest with you. There's as the father of 2 daughters, you know, that's one thing that makes me a little sleep better at night is that the rate of that type of disappearance is much lower in South Korea than it is in other parts of the world. So
That's because the village will turn on them immediately.
well, that and it's hard to get somebody out of what is essentially an island.
Yeah, that's true. So the only other news is this submarine that's, you know, the submarine at the Titanic that's gone missing.
Yeah, a
That's sort of
civilian submarine that was taking tourists down to go see the Titanic has gone missing.
Something to watch.
Daisy Girl Williams. Okay, I'll check out your chat.
Daisy Girl Williams chats have been a little wild today, Scott. I'm surprised you didn't
What-
see some of those. So.
Yeah, I just because I got a different tab open, so I'm not always reading the chat. Though you know, I honed in on the wrong one. All right, that's all I've got, guys. Thank you so much for watching. Appreciate you in the chat for spending your time with us. We do not take you for granted. We will be back on Wednesday for another show. And we've got the Privy Council will be 9 p.m. Eastern with Stan and the crew. I believe Stan will be on with us for the daytime show on CFC as well. And tomorrow we've got Blaine's. Who do we have on Writers Fix Problems tomorrow? Watcher.
You put me on the spot. I don't have it ready.
That's fine. Anyway, every Tuesday we've got the Writers Fix Problems. If you want to check that out, just look for the link on Twitter, or if you subscribe to the channel, hit the bell for notification. When it goes live, you will be notified. If you haven't, go ahead and make sure you're following Tactical Wisdom over. We're streaming live to that channel as well. So make sure you check that out. Joe, the guys are trying to talk you in the chat there too, like an after show over there on Tactical Wisdom.
Well, I may leave the chat up for a minute, but I don't know that we're going to do another show.
I was gonna say it's my bedtime almost, so
The Marquesa has been waiting very impatiently to go somewhere. So
yes, I can imagine. I can imagine. All right, Jim, thank you very much for joining us. Thanks, Shashawn. And even thanks to Stan for his time before the show began. Some good comments that he gave us.
we may have kind of a bombshell for Wednesday, for the record. Let's just
I don't want to jinx that too much, but
Yeah.
needless to say, if you care about your Second Amendment rights, you're going to want to check out the Wednesday show, come hook or crook. And so that'll be a banger. That's about it for us. Appreciate you guys all being here. And as always, stay safe.